There comes a moment in life when silence becomes louder than words, when presence speaks louder than speeches, and when the calm in your demeanor echoes louder than a storm. Life doesn't always reward the loudest voice in the room. It often bows before the quiet soul whose actions, energy, and resilience command attention without uttering a single syllable. We live in a world where people talk endlessly to prove their worth. But the real power belongs to those who don't just speak, they show. This is not about manipulation, nor is it about pride. This is about presence, about becoming so grounded, so intentional, and so radiant that your silence becomes your strategy and your character becomes your conversation. If you truly want to outsmart everyone without saying a word, you must first understand silence is not the absence of power, it is the highest form of power. Let me share with you powerful strategies that will transform the way you lead, influence, and rise silently. Cultivate presence that speaks volumes. There's a certain beauty in silence that words can never capture. It is in that silence where real presence is born. A presence that doesn't shout, but whispers strength. A presence that doesn't beg to be seen, yet commands the eyes of the world. This is not something that is taught in schools or explained in textbooks. This is something you cultivate when life has silenced you long enough to hear your own truth. Presence begins in the soul. It starts when you stop trying to fit into spaces that shrink you, when you stop explaining your journey to those who never walked your path, when you stop seeking applause from a crowd that claps for noise but stays silent for grace. You realize your true power, not when you're loud, but when you're grounded. The kind of groundedness that comes from scars you no longer hide. It's in the way you walk into a room with your chin held high, not from arrogance, but from self-respect. It's in the way your eyes reflect peace. Even when storms rage inside you, it's in the way your silence holds more weight than the loudest arguments. That's presence. That's when you no longer chase moments, you become the moment. There will always be someone louder, someone flashier, someone more dramatic. But none of that can outshine a soul that has found its own rhythm. When your presence is built on authenticity, not approval, it doesn't fade. It leaves imprints. Because the most unforgettable people are not those who said the most, they are the ones who made you feel something without saying anything at all. You don't have to perform to prove your value. You don't have to decorate your life with pretenses. Presence is not performance, it's truth in motion. It's being who you are unapologetically, gracefully, and quietly powerful. You become magnetic not because you shout your worth, but because you embody it. Presence is not what others see, it's what they sense. The energy you carry when you walk in, the way your stillness quiets chaos, the way your calm unsettles those addicted to noise. You become a mystery not because you're hiding, but because you've stopped explaining. You don't need to narrate your story when you're living it with such boldness that even silence becomes poetic. You don't cultivate presence by being perfect. You do it by being real, by being whole, even in your brokenness, by holding space for your pain and still choosing to rise. That quiet strength, that resilience that doesn't scream is what makes you unforgettable. Because true presence is not about control, it's about surrendering to who you are and carrying that truth like a crown. You may be underestimated when you're silent. Let them. Let them confuse your calm with weakness, your kindness with softness, your stillness with passiveness. They don't need to understand you. You're not here to be understood. You're here to become undeniable. And sometimes becoming undeniable starts with becoming unshakable. Let your presence tell your story. Let your grace narrate your resilience. Let your dignity reflect your battles. You don't owe anyone noise. You owe yourself peace. And in that peace, your presence will blossom. It will root deeply, grow steadily, and stand tall in the face of every storm. Because presence is not what you show, it's what you are. When you cultivate that kind of energy, people will feel it before they see it. They will sense something different about you. They won't be able to explain it, but they will be drawn to it. Because the world is starving for authenticity. And when you stop pretending, you give others permission to do the same. That's how presence becomes revolutionary. There is a kind of quiet that isn't empty, it's full of wisdom, full of purpose, full of fire. You carry that fire not in your voice, but in your heart. You don't need to scream for attention when your spirit already speaks for you. Your presence becomes your microphone, and your soul becomes the sound. Presence doesn't need translation. It transcends language. It touches the hearts of strangers, silences critics, and inspires those who've lost hope. Your story may be unheard, but your presence will echo. In the way you carry your joy, in the way you sit with your sorrow, in the way you remain rooted in truth while the world sways with trends. You don't become present by being loud. You become present by being awake. Awake to your worth, awake to your value, awake to your own light. And when you shine quietly, you teach the world that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stands, and that is enough. So keep showing up, not louder but deeper, not louder but truer, not louder but stronger. Because when you cultivate a presence that speaks volumes, you no longer need to say a word. The world listens anyway. Master the language of body and energy. Long before we ever speak, we are already communicating. Our energy introduces us long before our lips do. There is a silent, sacred conversation happening in every moment between hearts, between eyes, between souls. And in that space, where no words exist, truth lives. That's where the real power begins. That's where connection becomes unspoken but deeply felt. Every movement, every glance, every breath you take sends a message to the world. Whether you realize it or not, you are speaking through your stillness, through your posture, through your silence. It is not about being perfect, it's about being aware. Aware that even when you're not talking, you're being heard. Even when you're not trying to impress, you're being felt. The body carries stories that the voice hasn't yet told. It reveals who you are when no one is watching. When your shoulders are relaxed in chaos, you speak resilience. When your gaze is steady in uncertainty, you speak confidence. When your back is straight despite the weight you carry, you speak strength. And not one word has to be spoken. You see, people may not always remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. And that feeling isn't just created through kind words, it's created through alignment. When your body, your energy, and your presence all say the same thing, I am here and I am enough, that is when you begin to outsmart the world without saying a word. There is power in the way you sit in silence. There is meaning in the way you look into someone's eyes without fear. There is influence in the way you hold your space without apology. Your presence, your energy, your body language, it all becomes your vocabulary. A vocabulary far more honest than rehearsed sentences. There are those who speak with flowery words but walk with heavy fear. Their energy reveals what their voice tries to hide. But when your actions and your aura align with your truth, you become magnetic. You don't chase approval. You don't demand attention. You simply are, and that is enough to be remembered. The most impactful souls are not always the most talkative ones. They are the ones who mastered how to speak with intention. A soft smile in a harsh world, a gentle nod in a tense room, a patient breath when everyone else is shouting. These silent signals are louder than lectures, and they leave an imprint deeper than sound. To master this language, you must first become intimate with your own body and spirit. You must learn to listen to yourself, to notice when your hands shake not from weakness but from suppressed courage. To see how your shoulders drop when you're in safe company. To feel how your breath deepens when you're finally at peace. This awareness isn't taught, it's lived. When you become mindful of your energy, you begin to lead with it. You walk into rooms without needing to prove anything. You let your calm do the talking. You let your energy say, I've been through storms and yet I stand. You let your body declare, I know who I am and I no longer shrink to fit into places that don't honor me. You stop reacting. and start responding not with words, but with groundedness. You don't need to explain your boundaries when they're etched in your presence. You don't need to justify your peace when it radiates through your silence. You become so in tune with your own vibration that anything not aligned simply bounces off you. This mastery isn't about controlling others. It's about mastering yourself, your own impulses, your own fears, your own projections. When you learn to stand still without collapsing, to breathe deeply without breaking, to speak softly without diminishing, then you've unlocked a language that only the wise can hear. Let your stillness be the loudest thing in the room. Let your posture tell the story of your survival. Let your energy carry the vibration of love, of confidence, of boundaries, of healing. Speak not with rehearsed lines, but with embodied truth. You don't need a script when your life already speaks volumes. So many try to dominate conversations to feel seen, but you, my dear, you will be felt without trying. Because your body speaks the language of authenticity, your energy carries the dialect of resilience, and your silence echoes louder than 1,000 voices filled with fear. This is your superpower. You don't need to interrupt to be heard. You don't need to argue to be understood. When your soul is anchored, your energy does all the talking. And those who are attuned, those who live from depth and truth, they will hear you. Loud and clear. No words required. And that, right there, is the rarest kind of intelligence. Not the kind that needs to be proven, but the kind that is felt. The kind that speaks in every breath you take, every step you walk, and every pause you choose. When you master the language of body and energy, you begin to speak in silence and the whole world listens. Use restraint as your intelligence. There is a strength most people overlook. A power so subtle it gets mistaken for weakness. A wisdom so quiet it gets dismissed as passivity. But those who have walked through fire know this strength well. It is the power of restraint. The art of holding back when every part of you wants to react. The grace of choosing peace when war is easier. The brilliance of not speaking when silence will say more. To use restraint is to understand that not every situation deserves your reaction. Not every insult needs a comeback. Not every battle is worth fighting. In fact, restraint is a kind of emotional mastery that only those who have tasted pain and transformed it into wisdom can truly hold. It is the decision to not let chaos pull you in. It is the courage to walk away with your dignity intact. When the world provokes you to shout, restraint teaches you to breathe. When people try to trigger you into conflict, restraint teaches you to pause. When your ego rises, begging for revenge, restraint reminds you that your peace is far more valuable than any temporary victory. You do not need to prove anything to those who are committed to misunderstanding you. There is immense intelligence in knowing when to be still. It means you are observing, learning, conserving energy. It means you are no longer reactive, but intentional. And those who master intention rise above noise. They are not driven by the need to be right, but by the need to protect their energy. They do not play to win arguments, they play to win peace. When you practice restraint, you see people for what they are, not just what they say. You stop being pulled by every opinion, every provocation, every insecurity thrown your way. You begin to understand that people's behavior is a reflection of them, not you. And your ability to remain grounded is a reflection of your growth. Most people confuse silence with surrender. But you know better. Your silence is not compliance, it is strategy. Your quiet is not weakness, it is wisdom. You're not withholding because you're afraid. You're withholding because you're strong enough to choose peace. Because restraint is not about shrinking, it's about rising in a different way. There is a sacred confidence in the person who doesn't need to react. They become unpredictable, unshakable. Because when you no longer give the world your immediate emotions, you reclaim your power. You reclaim your narrative. You become someone who doesn't just survive conflict, but transforms it into clarity. Sometimes, people provoke you just to drain your power. They throw words like darts, hoping you'll bleed frustration. But when you choose restraint, those darts fall at your feet. They realize they cannot control you. They cannot trigger what you have already healed. And that's when you become untouchable, not because you fight, but because you don't have to. Restraint is also love. Love for yourself. Love for your peace. Love for your future. Because every time you respond to nonsense, you postpone your progress. Every time you engage in meaningless drama, you delay your destiny. Restraint says, I choose me. I choose peace. I choose growth over gratification. To be still while misunderstood. To be calm while provoked. To be silent while judged. That is a level of maturity no school can teach. It is earned in the fire of experience. It is developed in the silence of reflection. It is sharpened in the solitude of self-awareness. And once you have it, you realize this is true power. You no longer chase the last word. You no longer need to win every debate. You don't seek revenge because your success is the loudest answer. And you don't break character just because someone else is acting out of theirs. You protect your vibration like a sacred temple. You protect your mind like a precious garden. Because now you know one moment of reaction can cost you years of healing. There is nothing more powerful than a person who doesn't need the room to agree with them to know their worth. Who doesn't need to shout to be heard. Who doesn't need to attack to feel strong. Restraint becomes your armor. It shields you from unnecessary pain. It allows you to rise above the noise. It positions you for grace and growth. Let people underestimate you. Let them misread your silence. Let them call you cold, passive, or detached. Their labels do not define you. Your character does. Your peace does. Your consistency does. The loudest people often have the least control. But you're different. You're quiet because you're powerful. You're still because you're wise. You're restrained because you've evolved. So when the world tries to pull you into its chaos, pause. Breathe. Remind yourself who you are. And remember that the highest form of intelligence is restraint. Not because you couldn't react, but because you chose not to build a life that shouts without noise. There comes a time when you no longer desire to explain who you are. When you grow past the need for validation, applause, or permission, that is when you begin to build something sacred. A life that does not scream for attention, yet commands it. A life that doesn't chase recognition, yet earns respect. A life that shouts without making a sound. The foundation of such a life isn't made in the spotlight. It's laid in the quiet hours when no one is watching. In those moments, when you choose discipline over distraction, when you choose healing over hiding, when you choose to rise not to impress others but to meet your own potential, that is when the roots of a legacy begin to take form. You see, the most powerful people you'll ever meet are not always the loudest. They're often the ones who rise before dawn, who stay committed to their purpose, who don't speak of what they're building but build anyway. Their lives become a message even when their mouths stay closed. Because true greatness does not need to announce itself. It just is. To build a life that shouts without noise, you must stop trying to prove yourself and start improving yourself. You must stop explaining your dreams and start executing them. You must stop reacting to every judgment and start responding to your calling. Not everyone will understand your silence. But the ones who feel your spirit, those are the ones worth walking with. There is something magnetic about someone who doesn't try to impress, who doesn't decorate their journey to make it look more glamorous than it is, who shows up raw, real, and ready. There's beauty in quiet consistency, in daily devotion to growth, in humble progress. These are the bricks that build a life that speaks on its own. People may question your silence. They may mistake it for weakness or lack of ambition, but your results will speak for you. Your peace will reflect your strength. Your smile will reveal your resilience. And one day, the very ones who doubted your quiet journey will be the ones telling others how they once knew you. When your life is built on authenticity, you don't fear being misunderstood. You don't rush to defend yourself. You let your values speak. You let your habits speak. You let your peace speak. Your relationships become deeper. Your decisions become intentional. And your days become aligned with purpose. This is what it means to live out loud without saying a word. Your success doesn't need to be broadcasted. It will be evident in the glow you carry, in the kindness you extend, in the integrity you uphold. You don't have to argue for your worth when your presence already declares it. You don't have to convince anyone of your journey when your life becomes proof of the path. And let me remind you, you don't have to rush. Building a meaningful life is not a race, it's a rhythm. It's the daily choice to show up, even when no one claps. It's the willingness to stay the course when others take shortcuts. It's the patience to keep planting seeds, knowing the harvest will speak for itself. A quiet life does not mean a small life. It means a rooted life. One that is not swayed by public opinion. One that is not shaken by momentary storms. One that is not dependent on recognition to feel validated. It's a life that grows from the inside out, strong, steady, and sacred. When your life is built on values, not volume, your impact becomes timeless. Because people will forget what you said, but they will never forget the life you lived. They will remember how you showed up in hard times, how you remained graceful under pressure, how you chose humility when ego begged for attention. This kind of life is not for the faint of heart. It requires deep inner work. It requires you to heal the part of you that needs to be seen and instead focus on being true. It calls you to surrender the illusion of perfection and embrace the power of purpose. And that purpose will become your volume. You begin to shine not because you're trying, but because you are. Your consistency, your love, your courage, your calm, these become the voice of your legacy. You stop speaking to be heard and start living to be felt. And every step you take begins to echo with meaning, even in silence. So do the work. Heal the wounds. Build the habits. Protect your peace. And trust when your life is aligned, when your spirit is whole, when your path is pure, you won't need to shout. The life you've built will do all the speaking. And the world will listen without you having to say a word at the end of the day. There is a kind of brilliance that doesn't need to shine in the eyes of others. It glows quietly from within. In a world full of noise, chaos, and competition, you don't have to raise your voice to be powerful. You don't have to explain your worth to be valuable. You don't have to beg to be seen when your presence is already undeniable. Real wisdom, real power, and real transformation often unfold in silence. When you learn to cultivate a presence that speaks even before you do, you become unforgettable. When your body and your energy begin to express truth, alignment, and calm without the need for validation, you step into a language only the soul can understand. And when you choose restraint over reaction, grace over ego, you prove to yourself that not everything needs your voice. Some things need your strength, your silence, and your dignity. But the most profound way to outsmart the world without saying a word is to build a life so purposeful, so grounded, so authentic that it becomes your loudest statement. Let your discipline speak. Let your boundaries speak. Let your healing speak. Let your consistency speak. Let the life you live become the message you carry. Because in the end, you won't need to shout. You won't need to prove. You won't need to convince. You will simply be. And that silent, steady, radiant being, that is how you will outsmart everyone without saying a single word.